Hi, I just wanted to share more about the recent screening of Lady Wrestler, The Amazing Untold Story of African American Women in the Ring, the documentary I directed about the history of Black women integrating pro wrestling. It had a screening in New York during Black Wrestle Fest in Brooklyn, Juneteenth weekend, and in a couple of short previous videos, I kind of talked about the experience, but I wanted to share some more photos I took during the experience, which I will do at the end of this video. But I also wanted to share more about the experience that other writers and filmmakers may be able to take away from. So first of all, when you get an opportunity to do a screening, getting to and around that city where the screening is held is sometimes a challenge. Now, New York, of course, there's lots of different options to get around. There's taxis, there's Uber, there's subways, there's buses. And of course, you have the option of renting a car if you know how to drive. So for this screening of Lady Wrestler, um, I won't get into the details because it's too long of a story for me to get into for the purposes of this video. But for part of the trip, I took subways and buses because that was the most convenient and also the cheapest option. You can get a Metro card, which is basically a card to ride, a pass to ride the buses and subways all day long for $10. It's like $9, but a $10, like a dollar service charge or whatever. That is obviously the best deal, but it takes some maneuvering. So to make a long story short, for part of the trip, I ended up renting a car. So this trip was literally planes, trains, and automobiles. I flew into Newark, New Jersey, the airport there. I took subways into New York and subways and buses around the city. And for one leg of the trip, I actually rented a car. So I bring this up to say, there are things you can anticipate as a filmmaker, as a writer, when you get an opportunity to do a screening or a speaking engagement or whatever. And then there's things you can anticipate. So one of the things I could anticipate is my phobia of driving over bridges. Now, I didn't used to think of it as a phobia until I watched some YouTube videos about it and found out there is a spectrum of people being afraid to drive over bridges. And there's actually a technical term for it. I don't remember it. But I'm sort of on the low end of the spectrum where I can drive over low bridges and over bridges that aren't over, enormous bodies of water. Bridges that don't go over water are fine with me. But really, really high bridges that go over big bodies of water make me nervous. And I actually have ample reason to be nervous because a couple of trips I took in the 2000s, bridges collapsed after I had driven over them. I mean, not immediately after, but like a week later, one of the bridges in Minneapolis, I'm a huge Prince fan, and I'd gone to an event at Paisley Park. One of the bridges in Minnesota collapsed. And then I had went to an event in San Francisco, and the Bay Bridge, I think part of the Bay Bridge collapsed. So it's not that I have an unrealistic fear of driving over bridges. The fear is real, but it's just like, I don't think you should let fear hold you back from opportunities, because the odds of you actually being on a bridge when it collapses are, very narrow, very minor. What I did was I tried to actually use MapQuest and print out directions so that I could avoid bridges. And it seemed to work, but for some reason I kept taking wrong turns when I was on one leg of the trip in New York this past Juneteenth weekend. And so I ended up having to default to my GPS system on my phone. And of course, it takes me over the Brooklyn Bridge. Now, once I was on the bridge, I was fine. It feels so enclosed. And I made the trip early in the morning so that traffic would be lighter. And that was a good decision. So I was able to go over the bridge without too much anxiety, although I did have kind of a death grip on the steering wheel. And the funny thing is that when I rented a car, the only, it was a really busy weekend. Juneteenth was going on, Pride and some other, New York always has events going on. So rental cars were in short supply, and I got the last one, which happened to be this huge minivan. So here I am driving around New York in this big ass van, and it's hard to maneuver around all the tight little spaces and one-way streets to begin with. And here I am driving around in this van. But I made it. I lived to survive. I drove over the Brooklyn Bridge and was able to return the rental car in one piece, didn't get in an accident. I did end up driving around at one point for hours because I got lost because my GPS kept taking me on these like weird little side roads, and I would sort of like get impatient and feel like, oh God, I'm going to miss my turn. And sometimes I did miss my turn. So although I did get lost, I did eventually find my way, and I was able to successfully navigate driving around New York. Whew. Okay, so after I drop off the rental car, I'm taking a subway back to the airport, back to New Jersey, and I'm feeling good about myself. The screening had went well. Everyone at the screening, big shout out to Danielle Sullivan, who organized the Black Wrestle Fest, and everyone who was at the screening was really cool and supportive. So I'm about to get off the subway on my way to the airport, and this young man on the subway, um, he makes this comment about my appearance. He insults me, and I'm not going to repeat the insult because to repeat it would be to dignify it. But he says something really insulting to me, and then so I I was kind of in shock. It's like, of all the hundreds of people on the subway, he singled me out. And then when I was getting off the subway car, I turned the wrong way because I didn't know which way the doors would open, which platform the doors would open on. And he goes, "You're really dumb." So here I am thinking, I'm from Columbus, Ohio, still live in Columbus, Ohio. I'm thinking, oh, before I encountered this young man, I'm thinking, oh, I did well for someone who didn't grow up in New York. I visited New York multiple times before, but not really, hadn't really driven around. I'd driven, but not to the extent that I did on this particular trip. So you know, before this young man insults me, I'm thinking, I'm sitting there patting myself on the back, feeling like $1,000,000. And then he says he insults me not once, but twice. So there are multiple ways you can react when something unexpected like that happens. And once again, I wanted to bring this up because this is not something I could have anticipated. I'm on a business trip. I anticipated the fear of driving over the bridge. I anticipated that I would be a little bit nervous during the Q&A after screening the documentary, and I was able to, calm my nerves. But I could not anticipate this young man insulting me. So it is really important, I think, to have sort of a spiritual basis. I meditate and pray daily, and someone who I consider a mentor that I've talked about before on my channel is Tom Bilyeu. He's a motivational speaker, and he's also building a film studio. So he's a filmmaker and a motivational speaker who has a very, very successful, wildly popular platform on YouTube and a podcast. And Tom Bilyeu talks about the importance of meditating on a regular basis to sort of calm your mind so that in business you can kind of have your wits about you, and meditating also kind of opens up your creativity. So had I not had this basis of calm within me, that I hone on a daily basis by praying and meditating, this man's insult could have, A, number one, totally destroyed my self-confidence, or B, caused me to lash out at him. But, I can honestly say I was able to look at this young man with compassion and to think that there must be something seriously wrong with you if you're just picking on random strangers. So in my mind, not out loud, as I was getting off the subway, I said to the young man silently, I said, "Have a blessed day. You no." In my mind, I said, "Have a blessed day." And was my confidence shaken? Yes. Did I spend some time thinking about, oh, is there something wrong with me? Do I need to go change everything about myself so that random strangers don't pick on me? Yes, those thoughts crossed my mind, but I can honestly say that this young man's random insults plural, did not ruin the rest of my day. Anytime that the rest of the day, because I had to take the subway to the airport, and I had a long wait at the airport before I flew back to Columbus. Anytime negative thoughts about myself or about this young man would creep into my mind, I would just repeat a forgiveness mantra. And a mantra is just a fancy word for a saying or a phrase that you kind of repeat in your mind to center you. So I would just think forgiving thoughts toward this young man. Now, I have a whole list of sayings that I read every day. positive, uplifting affirmations. You know, as corny and trite as it may seem, they really do work, because I was able to call on these affirmations when I would start thinking about the insult that the young man had lobbed at me. Now, it's my list of mantras and affirmations that I revisit on a daily basis come from multiple sources, everywhere from Minister Joyce Meyer, someone who I listen to a lot, her messages I listen to a lot. And when I would start thinking negative thoughts based on this insult that this young man had said to me, something Joyce Meyer has said in one of her messages came to me, and it said, "The devil working through you is not going to beat me. I've got more light and love in my being than you've got meanness." That really helped a lot. And then comedian George Wallace, you know, hilarious, longtime veteran comedian, he has this saying that he closes his sets with. He says, "My love for you is unconditional and does not require your permission." So whenever I would start thinking negative, hostile thoughts toward this young man, I would say, "Young man on the subway, I love you and there's nothing you can do about it, because my love for you does not require your permission." I think that's the wording of George Wallace's saying. So this experience just reinforced to me the importance of having some kind of practice that helps you get centered, because filmmaking, writing, just being in business, period, is difficult. Dealing with other human beings is difficult. There are so many things that happen that you can't anticipate. Driving in crazy traffic is one thing, but somebody just singling you out for verbal abuse is totally something else. And I'm so glad that I have this toolkit to call on to get myself centered in those situations. So I just wanted to share that, and I will close out this video by sharing more photos from my New York trip, more than I shared in the previous couple of videos. I had so many cool experiences. You know, that one negative experience with that one random stranger on the subway was totally in the minority. Everyone I met at Black WrestleFest, from Daryl Dr. D Johnson, whom I had spoken to online and got to meet him in person, got to meet fellow wrestling documentarian and aficionado Christopher Anino. We got to hang out a little bit. So overall, Black WrestleFest, the Juneteenth screening of Lady Wrestler, was a positive experience. And so here are some photos that I'd like to share. If you like this video, please leave a comment, share it, and subscribe to my channel.